Welcome to another episode of the BrainFood Show. This one is this our first episode of the new year? I think we published one, but it's definitely our first recording. Dude, we're already like 18 days in. We've been a bit slack. It was busy beginning of the year. We got a lot of adverts on the main channel this month, and they always keep me busy.
That's nice.
It is. It is nice. It is busy. How's your new year?
Good. Yourself?
Good. Yeah. I should also mention I'm a little bit upset this morning.
Why are you upset, Simon?
Why am I upset, David? Well, I spent God knows how many hours trying to get this live streaming thing working, right? And background for listeners. What we wanted to do is we wanted to live stream an episode of this podcast just for fun, and then we'd edit it and do all the nice touching up bits and then put it out on iTunes as well, just for fun. This turned out into the least fun thing I've ever done. You have no idea how many different little cables and bits and pieces there are. I've got, I swear, just 6 different devices for the normal podcasting. And then you've got to work out this software called OBS, which live streams to a thing. And we just tried to do it. And anyone who did catch that, there were 200 people watching or whatever. They were like, we can't hear David. And I'm like, okay, I have no idea how to fix that. And then also, the screen was up there and it was showing 2/3 you and 1/3 me, despite it streaming my screen, which looked completely fine on the screen I was looking at. And then also we were trying to do all of this off a 2014 MacBook, which I thought it was my old Mac. And I was like, this will be perfect for, this sort of thing. Apparently that sort of computer can't cope when you're doing Audition, OBS, Skype, streaming, and God knows what else. Even now when we're just doing this call, its fan is going absolutely nuts. Sorry, rant over. Welcome to the show, everybody. I don't know if we'll cut that out. I do feel better now just getting it off my chest on the air. It's like therapy for me.
Yeah.
Sorry. What are we talking about today?
Today, it's probably best we're not live streaming this one because of the content. So we're going to talk about how the trial of the century in the 20th century, the first trial of the century, first trial called this popularly, was sort of...
That was the most complicated way of saying the trial of the century.
How it popularized the whole women jumping, half-naked women jumping out of cakes. And I kind of thought this was Marilyn Monroe. In my mind, it's always Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah. I think I first came across this in an episode of The Simpsons, maybe?
Yeah, because she had the movie, whatever, Some Like It Hot or something like that, where she does that.
Ooh, time for a pop culture ignorance moment. Have you ever seen a movie with Marilyn Monroe in it?
Just bits and pieces, so no.
Yeah. Me neither. I don't think I've ever seen bits and pieces. Yeah. Anyway, also this episode, it starts off so entertaining. Then it becomes incredibly dark.
So dark.
Then just as you think it's got dark, it gets even darker.
Well,
and then it ends a little bit more, hey.
That's what I was saying. Some of the content is maybe that's for the best that we're not live streaming our random thoughts and comments.
How does it work? Because I think this would definitely be an episode that probably, even though we won't say anything explicit, is, I would rank this as an episode for adults, perhaps?
Yeah, I think it's, I don't know. It's interesting.
What would you, I'd give it we have movie ratings in the UK. I know you have R and these ones that I don't understand, but we have ours just on numbers. So you've got an 18, which is people who are 18. You've got a 15, which is, I don't even know if that exists anymore. A 15 for people who are 15. And then you've got a 12A, which is for people who are 12 or accompanied by an adult.
That's interesting. I
would rank this as a 15.
Yeah. Ish. No, I don't know. It's not like it gets explicit in what we say, except for a few instances, and it's not really, I don't know.
But they're not just ranked because it's there's nudity or, there's swearing. It's I would say this contains pretty dark adult themes.
It's definitely
it
a
touches
contrast.
On pedophilia and rape.
And contrast from modern society to what was, back then acceptable, to at least among the wealthy, I guess. Even though technically still illegal at the time.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
It wasn't it wasn't.
Anyway, we'll get into all of this stuff, right?
Good start.
Just with that warning out of the way. Oh, my question about that was if because YouTube has that adult filter where you have to say you're 18 or whatever, which I don't know, before I was 18, it was when were you born? 1st of January, and then whatever date I can click on the fastest. Yeah. Anyway, are we starting with a quick fact?
Yes, something a little more lighthearted. So, have you ever wondered what the M stand for in M&Ms?
I'm going to say Yes, I have.
Awesome.
It's plagued me all my life.
Well, you're in luck.
Seriously, I've never thought about it.
Yeah. So in 1941, Forrest Mars Sr. of the Mars Candy Company, he decided to strike a deal with Bruce Murray, son of famed Hershey president William Murray, because he wanted to develop a hard, a chocolate candy with a hard outer shell. And Mars, he was thinking World War II was already kind of in Europe, of course, but the U.S. hadn't entered. But he thought if the U.S. enters, there's going to be chocolate shortages, or there might just be chocolate shortages in general from shipping issues and stuff. So he's thinking that. So he thought he'd like to secure a partnership with Hershey to get, access to their supply lines of chocolate. And so that's what he does. He approaches him. They strike a deal to make these new M&Ms, which they actually, Forrest Mars Sr. actually first saw these in the 1930s during the Spanish Civil War. So they had basically, it was M&Ms, basically, exactly. He just copied it completely and made his own little M&M thing. And so they strike a deal. Murray gets 20% of the stake of the new M&M. And later Mars would buy out this after the war ended, and there's no longer need for Hershey's chocolate to have access to that. So in the end, M&Ms stands for Mars and Murray, the co-creators of
What
the
are
candy.
your feelings about M&Ms?
Peanut M&Ms great, regular ones not good. I find the chocolate to be like as low quality as possible.
Hang on, there's 3 types, right? Peanut, regular, and peanut. Peanut butter?
Yeah.
Wait, did you say peanut butter or just peanut?
Just peanut. I mean, peanut butter's okay. There's also almond.
Yeah.
Almond's all right.
What?
Yeah, you've never had the almond ones?
No.
Yeah, they're all right. I still say the peanut ones are great, especially when you get the lucky ones that have like 2 peanuts in them.
Yeah, man.
Those are the best.
We are. What's that clever phrase? To simpatico.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I regard as a clever phrase. Because the smaller ones. Do you have Smarties? Some countries call them lentils. Yeah. Cool. These are kind of like M&Ms, and those are also bad.
Mm-hmm.
And the regular M&Ms, what's the point?
Yeah.
They're just Smarties. Peanut M&Ms. Oh, those are my joint. I would always get these when I go to the cinema. The problem is my wife and partner of like 7 years is allergic.
Oh, no.
So my peanut M&M consumption has gone down, as has my consumption of peanut butter.
Oh,
has gone down.
That's not good.
Peanut butter less so. I still keep. She's not like one of these people who will just her face will swell up and she'll die when she like sniffs peanuts. Yeah. But so I keep some peanut butter in the house. Yeah. But like peanut M&Ms are a bit, don't want to have those around. They're too easy to mistake for something else and eat. Anyway. I don't miss them as much because I'll still eat them absolutely, but those are glorious chocolates. Yeah. Sorry, I don't know what's with all my tangents today. Just I had a passion to know what M&Ms you like.
Today's episode is sponsored by Dashlane. You've probably heard of identity protection, password managers, and VPNs, but do you have them? Are you using them? Well, not, you probably should be. And the best way to do that is with Dashlane, which is a one-stop shop for all of your digital identity protection needs. Now, if all your passwords are the same, we've all been guilty of this at some point or another. It's a really bad idea, and you can use Dashlane's password manager to create and securely store complex and unique passwords, making it less likely that your accounts are going to be compromised. They also have a VPN as part of their service, meaning that you can go and browse the internet securely and confidently, even in public Wi-Fi that you might not necessarily trust. In fact, you shouldn't really trust any public Wi-Fi. But it's not just that. They also actively monitor the dark web, the seedy underbelly of the web, to see if your information has been sold to some nefarious individual. And if that is the case, you can go in, you can change your passwords before that person gets access to your other accounts, which maybe share that username and password. Plus, Dashlane does what it's always done. It stores your passwords, it keeps your personal data secure, it fills all those annoying boxes for payment information in just a second. A lot of Dashlane is for free, but there are some premium upgrades you can buy if you want to. To see if those are right for you, you can get a 30-day free trial of Dashlane Premium. Just go to dashlane.com/today I found out, and that'll be a really good way for you to see if it's just a good fit for you, and it probably will be. So just go to dashlane.com/today I found out, and let's get back to the show.
All right, so now moving into the main content of today's show is how the trial of the century led to the popularity of women jumping out of cakes. And so we're going to go all the way back to just kind of the very beginnings of something like this. So we actually go all the way back to the ancient Romans. While they did not have women jumping out of cakes or anything like that, what they did have is they gave us some of the first known instances of humans basically using food for a lot of, not just for eating, but also just for the sort of an entertainment, the way they would make it and display it and things like this. And so they would have stuff like, peacocks and ostriches and dormice and songbirds and all that, like stuffed in.
Dude, no, hang on. Rare songbirds I see in the notes.
Yeah, and
so I'm assuming it was like a point of pride. It's like, ooh, we found something endangered.
Yeah, and it wasn't just that they would
feed it to our guests.
Wasn't just they would cook these things. It was that they would also do like elaborate ways of cooking them. So they would stuff one of the animals inside of another. So you'd have like the largest animal. So you could think of it like a cow.
Oh, like a turducken.
Yes.
Whoa.
Yes.
Okay, no, we're taking to a different level.
No, yeah. So you start with like, there was random stuff, but like if you wanted to go big, you'd have like a cow, and inside that would be a pig, and inside that would be like a lamb, and then a rabbit and a chicken and a mouse inside of all that, and stuffed with various things.
Do you sense a mini documentary coming on?
Well, there is, turns out, the Guinness Book of Guinness World Records, I guess. I always say, do you know it as Guinness Book of World Records as well? Is it just me?
Yeah, it's a mouthful, isn't it?
But it's actually Guinness World Records now, and they changed it, and it just always throws me.
Oh, they did?
Yeah. So in any event.
I don't care. I'll call it whatever I please.
According to them. Now, who knows if this is actually accurate, because they're not always, totally accurate on some of these sorts of things. But the current largest item available on a menu in a restaurant in the world is one of these very things, and it starts with a full camel, and then inside the camel is a lamb, and then in a full lamb, and then inside that is chickens. Lots of chickens, as many as they can fit. And inside that, the chickens, they have usually fish or eggs, or both. And then the whole thing, like at each stage, is stuffed with rice and various other fixing items. And then it's all cooked. It takes about 24 hours to cook. And so you have to order it well in advance. And it feeds, obviously, many, many people. And it's sort of an elaborate, very expensive dish to order.
Okay, a couple of things on this. I did some looking into this because I was like, because it's January when we're recording this, and I'm thinking about what mini docs we want to line up for this year. And I'm like, where are they serving this dish? And how do I eat it? Because I think the Guinness Book said it was available on a menu, right?
Yeah, and there was some controversy over whether it was still available on a menu or this was just something that people made at one point, as whether the Guinness was right. But there does appear to be instances of it actually being served, usually at like chic, like really wealthy. But at the same time, like what restaurant still serves this is sort of the sort of skepticism, I think, as to whether the Guinness World Records is being totally accurate on this one. Did you find any restaurant that actually still serves this?
I didn't find any restaurants. And I also found that it would just seem to be a lot of myth and legend surrounding it and not anything confirmed. But I'll acquiesce to you on that one.
Yeah, it has been
far better at this stuff than
it has been a while since I looked up this one, but I did find a couple instances of it actually being served, supposedly. I mean, of course, the news reports aren't always the most accurate things in the world and sensationalized things, but presumably that would be also what the Guinness World Records was going off of. But in any event, it's just an example. Going back to the whole point of this, regardless, is that the Romans...
Wait, hang on. I don't want to get off this just yet because it's amazing.
Yeah. Well, no, I was going to say the Romans, they definitely did this sort of thing. Maybe not with a camel, but with like cows and like just random things, lambs and things that they ate. And it was just sort of an elaborate way to present food as sort of an entertainment piece and, a show of wealth and things like that and skill of your chef and things of this nature.
Look, whenever we do a live show of this podcast, not the live streaming kind, but where we go somewhere like a bar or whatever, where people do podcast live shows, where there's like a sort of like a comedy club or whatever, where people do these things, we should absolutely also cook one of these things.
I mean, there's got to be some chef somewhere that would do something like this. I mean,
I bet there would be.
Yeah. How hard could it be?
Like our audience who listen to this show or watch our like YouTube channel, there must be someone who knows someone who could pull this off.
Yeah. I mean,
right?
I presume they probably cook some of the stuff beforehand, before stuffing it, and then cook like the outer stuff.
Well, it'd be a bit weird if they were just putting raw eggs in there.
Yeah, so presumably like the inner stuff is cooked beforehand, one would think, and then kind of stuffed, and then the outer. Yeah. But in any event.
Sorry, I can't get off how it's just because I'm a massive glutton and I love trying all the sorts of like different weird foods. I love traveling, but then I realize it's just because I love eating and I just love going places and trying new foods.
This to me sounds not appetizing at all. I'm just like, that's
because your diet consists of chicken breasts.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. And so I don't know, it does not sound good to me. It sounds like a mix of a lot of things that would be gross. And I'll take the stuffed chickens, I guess, inside. But
oh man, no, I would embrace that. Anyway, sorry, I've distracted you for long enough. Do continue.
So if we're going to the Romans, they sort of started to over time progress this to actually start to make the things appear live, like they were still alive and in action. So we have like Petronius, first century AD, writes that there was dishes where they like had the fish seeming as if they were swimming in like seas of sauces and things like this. And they would do like, he also describes one where a rabbit, as they put like bird's wings on it, and have it posing like it's the Pegasus in flight or something. And so it was just, they kind of started, the important part of here is they were migrating to making it appear live, right? And so then if we fast forward to the medieval royals, and they kind of started to take this to the next level. They still did this sort of thing, but they started to advance it, like the peacocks now, they would put the original plumage back on the bird after it's cooked, so it would look all decked out. And they even had, there was one account of grilled, they had roosters that they put armor on, and then like, not real armor, but just like little paper armor. And then they would just have it like as if it was jousting. So they would put it on like the roosters on like a pig and stuff. There was one account where they sort of reenacting a jousting event and stuff like this.
Wait.
Yeah.
There's a cooked rooster in fake armor riding a cooked pig pretending to be jousting.
Yeah, that's great.
What happened to this? Now it's like you go to a fancy restaurant and it just seems to be a giant plate with a small amount of food on it.
Yeah, this is way better.
I'd like to go and see it. I'd like a rooster jousting.
This is way better. And it's actually thought this is where the whole, the pig with an apple in its mouth came from, was probably around this era. And it's thought for the same to sort of make it seem like it was eating or something. They even had, there was one report of fire breathing effect where they would put like like alcohol and stuff in the, like a swan or a fish, and then they would light it. So it kind of like fire breathe for a second. So eventually they start to migrate to actual live things. And so the first ones is like birds and frogs were particularly popular to bake them in, or I mean, not bake them, but they would put them in afterwards in like a separate little part so it wouldn't mess up the actual food item. But it was all kind of concealed inside the main food item. And so we have one account of this is a 1474 cookbook by Maestro Martino. And he explains basically how to prepare like a pie so that you can put frogs in it and not, mess up the rest of it, but still have the frogs come out so you could still eat it, but the frogs are like popping out of it. So if you want to,
should I read this quote? Yeah. In the empty space that remains around the small pie, put some live birds, as many as it will hold, and the birds should be placed in it just before it is to be served. And when it is served, before those seated at the banquet, you remove the cover above, and the little birds fly away. This is done to entertain and amuse your company, and in order that they do not remain disappointed by this, cut the pie up and serve.
Yeah, and
dude, this is so cool.
Yeah, and we have another.
Is it weird that I find this like sort of? It's like performance and dining combined.
Exactly. But like not debauched as the examples inevitably become, as we'll get into. So they do. There's another one, 1660 British cookbook, where he describes the same sort of thing, where they put candles on the thing, and the birds, if you make the room dark, apparently he states this, Robert May, who wrote the cookbook, says the birds would end up like going towards the light and like flapping, and they would blow out the candles, and then you'd have the frogs hop out afterwards, and then it would create, as he says, it would cause the ladies to shriek, creating a diverting hurly-burly amongst the guests in the dark, was the quote there.
Amazing.
Yeah, and this actually, have you ever heard of like pie birds? That's like still a thing, ceramic pie birds?
No.
Yeah, so you put them into pies, and it just functions as a way to allow steam to escape and stuff. And this is thought to be where the whole idea of the pie birds, the ceramic, came from.
A good friend of mine runs a store that sells this sort of stuff, like dinnerware. I'm going to ask him if he's got some pie birds. Maybe I'll buy some.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what I'm looking at, by the way? Speaking of things, like I like getting things related to the show. Remember how we discussed the Caganer, the guy who...
Did you get it?
I'm looking at one right now.
Oh, nice.
It's sitting on my little microphone volume control system. Well, it's what's most notable about it is it's a very small man and it's a very large booth. I'll send you a picture of this. Nice. Maybe we can put it up on the website.
Nice. So eventually they even progressed this to doing humans. And so this is the best one of all at this. So French engineer.
This is how it's linking to cakes.
Yeah, French engineer Philippe Lebon, among many other ostentations entremets that he had prepared, was an enormous, and this had to have been actually absolutely massive, meat pie containing a reported 28 musicians who played as they opened the giant crust.
What?
Yeah.
How big a pie was
Presumably, I mean, they couldn't have cooked it, right? It had to just been dough, or I don't know. How would you have? I mean, there's no oven. Maybe do it in sections or something, and then put it all around the musicians or something.
And then you'd have like a regular pie in the center for the people to eat?
I don't know. I mean, maybe.
God, this is really bizarre.
Yeah, so either way. Oh, and this was 1626, the Duke and Duchess of Buckingham. This one was actually pretty famous. Presented Charles I with a pie, and inside the pie was a dwarf named, who eventually became Sir Geoffrey Hudson. And so this one's kind of famous because internet rumors, they always say that like they accidentally cooked him in the pie and he died, but he didn't actually. He was still quite alive at the time. So in any event, this all brings us back to women jumping out of cakes. So naturally, so you have a lot of rich men and fairly debauched in some cases, as we'll get into. And they, by the 1800s, seem to have gone to just going with attractive ladies jumping out of food things.
They were like, you know what we could do instead of this dwarf?
Yeah.
A naked woman.
Yeah. So this seems to have been a thing, but the party, there was one party that popularized the practice, and this was thrown by one Stanford White, who is a very prominent architect of his day, like extremely wealthy, extremely prominent, and he's best known today just mainly for the designing of the Washington Square Arch is probably what most people would know him for. But he actually designed a lot of other stuff, like the second Madison Square Gardens and tons of stuff. Like he has quite an impressive resume. Super wealthy, super successful. He throws this party in 1895, and he gathered a lot of distinguished men, as he did, because he was super popular among all the elite around town and the country. And so including Nikola Tesla actually was there at this party. And so because White actually designed Tesla's Wardenclyffe laboratory, which is the one that has we see the pictures of the Tesla Tower. Stuff.
This is cool.
Yeah.
The whole story behind that's interesting.
Yeah, so this was probably how they met or how they knew each other. So either way, Tesla's there. Lots of super wealthy people are there. And so the feature attraction of this is at a certain point, they wheel out an enormous pie, out of which, according to actress and model Evelyn Nesbit, who's going to be who we talk about a lot here coming up, in that pie was a 15 or 16-year-old girl, Susie Johnson, wearing only a piece of see-through gauze as she jumped out.
Oh.
And so Nesbit would actually later report of this, that also with her was a lot of birds came out at the same time.
Of course they were.
And they flew around the room. And then Nesbit, she's later said that she...
Oh, I don't want to read that. That's deeply unpleasant. I told Mr. White I had heard later he had ruined the girl that night, but he only laughed.
Now, it should be noted here that at this point, Nesbit did have a very good incentive to try to make White look as awful as possible. Now, he does appear to be a quite awful person in some respects, but he only laughed thing may have been thrown in for effect at the trial, which we'll get to a little bit later. So it's not...
so this is taken from the trial.
Yeah, later. So she was definitely incentivized to try to make him look as awful as possible. And what's noteworthy of that is later, after the trial, when she was no longer incentivized, she softened quite a bit on her opinion of White, and like, a lot of her stories and stuff about him. So not really clear. And he was dead at this point, so he couldn't defend himself. But there does appear to be enough evidence that he was quite the, you'll see. We'll get to it.
15 or 16 years old. When was this? Was that?
No, and even contrary to popular belief, even then, this would have been considered a little bit not appropriate.
Not quite right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Especially for the age of a lot of the men, and so what would he have been? White himself would have been in his late 30s, I think, at this point.
Okay.
So either way,
it's pretty grim.
Either way. So what made this party stand out among many others that had, similar type things? And it turns out nothing at first. And in fact, it would take about a decade before this party would become sort of famous nationwide and beyond to some extent. And it became known as the Pie Girl Dinner because later, about 10 years later, White himself was murdered by the husband of Evelyn Nesbit. So why was this so sensational? I mean, it's just one guy killing another guy. Why was this such a huge story? And so you have the setup here is you have one of the most prominent architects in the country, White, You have an insanely wealthy Harry Thaw, who is Evelyn Nesbit's husband. I think his net worth was like $40 million, which at the time, which probably would have been several $100 million today. Nesbit herself was she's often considered the world's first supermodel and first pinup girl and first, she was extremely successful, as we'll get into, on that end of things. Although back then, unfortunately for her, that didn't really pay well like it does today. I mean, she did okay, but she definitely she needed a husband still to support herself long term, which gets to some of that incentivization that we'll talk about shortly. But so anyways, needless to say so you have these two really wealthy, prominent people, and you have the first, this super popular model. Naturally, this became front page news across the country during the entire trial.
Sure.
That would happen. And in fact, President Theodore Roosevelt at the time, because of the details that were going in of kind of the story that we'll get into, he actually tried to see if there was a way to make it so the U.S. Postal Service could ban any newspaper that would print the details, because he called them the full disgusting particulars of the thing, but it turns out there wasn't a way to do it legally, so it didn't end up happening.
The Postal Service?
Yeah, he was going to see if he talked to the Postmaster General to see if there was a way, if they could just...
Oh, about just not delivering them.
Yeah, can we just... is there a sort of a legal way we can do this where we can justify, we're just any newspaper that's going to print the details, we're just no longer, you can't send your stuff through the U.S. Postal Service. Turns out there wasn't a way. So they...
What? Like Roosevelt said, we did a big episode. We did several episodes on Roosevelt.
He's pretty great.
He's pretty great, but he was also not a big one for press freedom.
Yeah.
Like, we did, I think it was on, maybe it was Biographics, and we kind of talked to another channel I run a little bit about this. And it's kind of like, he's a good guy, like 100%. Mm-hmm. He did a lot of cool things. But, this was also like the late 18th century. Yeah. When was he president? Yeah. Around that time? Yeah. He wasn't so keen on people printing bad things about him.
And he also wasn't...
Like today, like anyone, it would be.
He was also a pretty big supporter of like certain eugenics things and stuff, which, I mean, to be fair to him...
But that was normal.
That was completely, like most people were. That was just very popular until, of course...
The Nazis kind of ruined it.
The Nazis did ruin it. Everyone was like, oh, wait a minute. They took it to the extreme, and it was like, oh, wait, maybe we should rethink this, because, but anyways, so how did this whole thing get started? How did this murder come to be? And so it turns out Nesbit, when she was born, was actually quite not like super affluent, more like upper middle class type thing. Her father was a lawyer, and apparently was quite encouraging of her education, which was weird at the time. Actually bought her a ton of books and gave her own little library, and was quite encouraging of her learning and all sorts of things that most girls of the day did not get.
Right.
And so, but unfortunately for her, when she was around 11-ish, it's not really known because she doesn't actually know when she was born exactly, just within like a range. Because one of the problems was her mother would soon change it a lot to get around child labor laws. She would, they were coming about at the time. So she would kind of adjust the year accordingly to just because they were trying to make ends meet and stuff. So
I love this that just before there were kind of documents.
Yeah. So she was 11-ish when her father died suddenly, and so the mother had to try to figure out how to support the family, and she really had no means to do this. So for a couple years later, this fast forward a little bit, Nesbit's mother herself and her little brother are working 10 to 12-hour days at a department store called Wanamaker's, just kind of working their various jobs, clerks and all that sort of thing. And when a random customer comes in, and so she's 12 or 13 or something at the time, somewhere in there, a random customer comes in who's happens to be an artist. He thinks she's quite beautiful, and he wants to paint her basically. So he offers her $1 to just paint her portrait. It's about $30 today. And so the mother, of course, was like, "Who's this guy?" But she said, "Sure, if I can supervise it, if I can be there when you're doing it, make sure nothing weird is going on here. Sure." And
okay, I'm glad her mother was like that, because I feel like everything else in the story would have been like, "Well, no." And then he rapes her and she died. Okay. It's like the darkness of the story.
That is a thing that would happen at the time. So, the mother wanted to make sure. But there also were legitimate artists who just like to paint, people and stuff. So this turned out to be one of those. And he ended up connecting her with many, many other artists. And so she very quickly became quite famous around town as just, for her modeling. And eventually she realized that
someone to be painted.
Yeah, someone to be painted. And she realized that she could actually make a living at this. And so to quote her,
"When I saw I could earn more money posing as an artist's model than I could at Wanamaker's, I gave my mother no peace until she permitted me to pose for a livelihood."
And so this, she very quickly became arguably the most famous model in the country. She even became Charles Gibson's most famous. So there was this thing he would draw, like the Gibson girls, sort of the all-American woman type thing.
I don't know Charles Gibson.
I didn't know his work until actually reading up on these Gibson girls and stuff. And he also had a Gibson man and stuff. But anyways, his most famous of the Gibson girls was Nesbit, and he drew her as in his Woman, the Eternal Question. And so this portrait kind of shows her from the side, and her hair is done up, and the way it's laid across like her shoulders is like a question mark. And so it was quite a famous portrait. So you can Google that if you like.
I'm Googling it right now. Oh, when you search woman Thaw, it's the first thing. Oh, there you go. Yeah. Oh, in my mind, I kind of had her imagining like her hair in this is down her shoulders in sort of a natural question mark.
Yeah.
Look, in my mind, before I saw the picture, I had to sort of imagining like her hair being like pointing upwards.
Like a Marge Simpson or something.
Exactly. It's like with like hairspray
this looks
a big question
much more
mark.
natural. But
it's a nice image.
Yeah, and so this was the most popular of his Gibson girls portraits. So then she very quickly after this was featured in basically every popular magazine in the US, and she was, as advertisements and as a general model and stuff like this, from everything from, basically any products. She was very popularly used, but she got really tired of just sitting around for hours on end while people painted her, took her picture and whatnot. It was really boring to just sit there. That was
she didn't have Bluetooth headphones and podcasts to listen to, did she?
She didn't. Her job was just to sit there, for all day while people, looked at her and stuff. So she got bored with this naturally. And so she decides she would like to get into theater. But the problem is theater at the time, like to be an actress was basically, a good percentage were just prostitutes. Like this was a way to sort of advertise their services.
Really?
Yeah. If you were a actress, you could, you up there acting, and then the men in the audience could be, there was these orange girls. There was these people called orange girls, women, obviously, and young teen girls, like really young, that would very scantily clad, who would just kind of go around and hand out fruit and things. So they would sell to the audience members. And then if you wanted to meet one of the actresses after, you could inquire with the orange girl if you could. And then they would say if the actress was available for that sort of thing. And so this was, this wasn't all.
So hold on, wait, because I know, and I'm just drawing on like, this is where I need to disclaim this is Simon's random memories of the past knowledge rather than research knowledge. Yeah. Didn't Shakespeare, because the immediate thing that came to my mind was, where are legitimate actresses doing acting? And then I remembered, like, is it right that Shakespeare just had men in his plays and the men would play women?
I've heard that, but I have no idea if that's actually true, but I've heard that same thing, but
let's follow up on that.
Yeah, that's I know nothing about that other than that I've heard it. As well.
Because I know there was definitely a lot of cross-dressing and stuff in Shakespeare's plays, but I can't remember if that's because whether it was just for fun or whether it was because women didn't act in plays.
Yeah.
I'll follow up.
Yeah.
I'll follow up.
But so either way, this was a thing. And another way, even if they weren't acting as prostitutes, there were legitimate actresses who didn't do that, but it was just a way to a side income because you didn't make a lot of money at theater at the time. Not like today where like a famous actress would, just be set for life. Like you had a limited time that you could make money, and this was just a way to make more money. And so they would do this. And another thing the actresses would do, of course, was try to find like a wealthy man in the audience who would then take them as a mistress or a wife, either way. And then that was another way to set themselves up. So this was just sort of a thing. And so this had a bad reputation. She's a young teen girl. Her mom's like, no, you're not getting into theater. That's not going to thing for you. And so, but she was quite insistent. I should say before this. So have you heard the expression "said the actress to the bishop"?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Okay. So
it's like, is this a British thing?
You guys British say
it's just a British thing? Because the one I always hear on TV is like it means like, well, that's what she said.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same exact sentiment, so everyone can understand. And it turns out "said the actress to the bishop" actually came about in the late 19th and early 20th century. Around this same time, Nesbit wanted to be an actress, and it was this exact thing. It was just because the actresses, of course, it came about from they were, the idea of them confessing their various sexual escapades to clergymen, working as prostitutes and stuff. And so it's like "said the actress to the bishop," like something illicit.
That's so cool. I never realized.
Yeah, and so that was kind of the idea behind the saying, and that was, that saying's been around for a long time.
Yeah, I had no idea what it meant, other than like that's what she said.
Yeah. And so,
but I don't think I'd use that one. But like, I guess like my parents' generation would probably use said the actress to the bishop.
Yeah.
But I don't think my parents are so crass, but like of their generation, people would.
Yeah. And so, and just for people wondering, that's what she said actually came about or at least the first documented instance of it's known is in 1975 in a Chevy Chase Saturday Night Live skit, a Weekend Update skit. And it would be later popularized by Wayne's World and then, of course, more recently by The Office. But I mean, it might have been around longer than that, but the first known documented instance of it was in the 1970s. And there was some there were some others like said the woman to the soldier or something was another one in like the 1950s or something. Same sort of sentiment, but that's what she said appears to be a 1970s one. But
I love it.
Either way, that's needless to say,
that's what she said.
Her mother was pretty against the whole acting thing for this reason. She's a very beautiful young lady and lots of men already, obviously based on her modeling career. So she was just like, no, I don't think so. But eventually she gave in as long as the mother was like, okay, we can do this, but I'm going to basically keep a close eye on you and supervise everything. So Nesbit very quickly becomes a very successful actress, and noted a lot of the accounts of her acting didn't really mention much about her actual acting, just how beautiful she was kind of the thing that often got brought up. So this brings us to Stanford White. So they first meet. She meets him. He sees her at a play, wants to meet her afterwards, and they meet in 1901. He's 46 at the time, and she was around 15 or so. And again, she didn't actually know exactly when she was born, so ish. Give or take a year.
Okay.
Which is so weird. Can you imagine not knowing when you were born?
Yeah, no, I'm just like, wait. Like, not even her mother told her when she was really, like, just the year.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe her mother didn't really remember, Like, I don't know. Kind of weird.
You don't remember the year you gave birth?
Yeah. I mean, she knew her brother, I think, was like a year and a half younger than her. So, but either way, she didn't actually know. She just said her mother changed the year all the time. So she wasn't really actually sure. When exactly, but
weird. But
either way. So White, when he first encounters her, he actually seems, I mean, he's quite a charismatic guy apparently, which is part of the reason he was so popular around town, not just his, how rich and successful he was as an architect, but he was just a really likable guy. A lot of people liked him. Which we'll get into in a bit. This is another reason Thaw
is
hated
this the
him.
Same guy who plays, this is the guy who's, I don't know, like, judging on how this episode goes, he seems like a pretty awful man. Is this the same guy?
Yeah, he does seem like a pretty awful man. And again, there is some question as to whether how awful he actually was.
Right, because of the trial.
He was dead. No one was there to defend him, basically, other than,
Yeah.
So, it does still seem like he was a pretty awful guy in some ways. But he seemed apparently charismatic, nice.
Dear listeners, you will see.
Yeah.
Coming up.
Yeah, so he at first acts like he's going to take a paternal role. Like, here's this young woman. She's being introduced into high society as a beautiful young actress. People are going to be going after her. He's like, I'm going to take this protective role, help the mother out in protecting this young girl. And he takes in,
White.
And to maybe sell it, I guess he also takes in her younger brother to help him out, and he helps the whole family. He gets the brother, his name is Howard. He got him into Chester Military Academy, and this was a kid who had no prospects, beyond. So to get into like an academy like this was huge for his life. And actually, Howard would later very much not like the things his sister would go on to say about White during the trial. Howard was one that was like, no, White was a good guy. Like, what are you doing? But either way, and he didn't appreciate the way White was painted later. But of course, White was only ever like a paternal figure to him. He kind of considered him to be a father figure and helped him out. So either way, this things kind of went the other way though. This is where White is like, no. So Nesbit's mother, she's going to go out of town. And so White says, sure, I'll look after her, make sure she's, no one's going after her and she stays nice and safe. So he invites Nesbit over for dinner when their mother's out of town. And then he takes her to his mirror room. And yes, he has a mirror room that is literally a room with the walls, all the walls and ceiling are mirrors and like a bed like.
Oh God, as soon as she walks in there, it's like.
This is totally like a 50 Shades of Grey type thing, like. Yeah. And it's right near the room where she actually got the nickname later, the girl in the red.
I thought you were gonna say like. Yeah, the mirror room, right next to his sex room.
No, right next to his room. That was where she got the nickname, the girl in the red velvet swing, because it's literally this room with like red velvet all over in this swing that he would.
It was a sex room.
It was basically a sex room. But anyways, so she's in there. They're chatting, having a good time, sitting on a nice, comfy, like lounging couch type thing that you can lay down on. And so then she.
Why would you lay down on such a couch, David?
So he gives her some champagne, and Nesbit would describe it during the trial as bitter and funny tasting, and I didn't care for it much.
Oh, she's getting drugged for sure.
Yeah.
This is what you always hear, right?
Yeah.
The bitter,
Yeah.
at least in thriller novels that I read. It's like anytime, it's like that. Just it's such a trope. Ooh, this tastes bitter.
Yeah.
Anyone who's read a book knows you're about to get raped.
Now that would be interesting
Or
to
like
note. Is
murdered,
it
or
actually
put in the back of someone's trunk and dumped in a lake?
is that just a trope that people say like in movies and stuff, or is it actually like bitter and whatever? What are the drugs they use for that? We should look up like Bill Cosby, right? Isn't that like all over there?
We just did a biographics video. It's not come out yet on Bill Cosby.
Okay.
I didn't really know anything about him because like he didn't really cross the pond. This was
Really, that story didn't?
This was no, I mean the story did.
Okay.
It was like, there's some like dude in America who's raping kids.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh wow, everyone loved this guy.
No, yeah, and he was like wholesome and so, like
Yeah.
he
He sounds like he would have his own like weird sex
oh
ring.
yeah. So
Like, this white guy.
follow up. It does whatever drugs they use taste bitter. I'm curious.
I don't want that in my history. Like, what drug do you rape women with?
It's funny. I sent Carl one. I sent Carl Smallwood one the other day that was like that, where I can't even remember what it was, but I was like, "How?"
I know this one. 'cause
How would you like
he posted it on-
How would you like your search history to look really bad? And he was like, "I'll take it."
You know, he posted this on Twitter and he just like he posted the screenshot asking for that article. I can't remember what it is, but, and he just wrote, "Thanks, Devin." And I just replied to it as well. Thanks, Devin.
Okay, I'm gonna look that up real quick because I don't remember what I said exactly or what the topic was.
If you want to follow Carl Smallwood, Fact Fiend is his channel. His Twitter is also absolute. Carl just does not give a shit.
No, he
like
doesn't.
He'll be calling out trolls all the time, doing all this stuff. It is insanely entertaining. His Twitter, Carl Smallwood. If you just look him up, I'm sure he's on there. It's very, very good.
Oh, he had something very nice to say about me here. That's nice.
Oh,
In a
yeah.
completely unrelated tweet in which someone insulted today, I found out, and he went the other way.
I feel like he should because he writes a lot.
Oh,
of
he did a
stuff.
few tweets. He went on a rant on today. I found out, and my side. Good for you.
Oh wow!
You,
What
Carl.
was the rant? Do you want to share?
Someone was. I have literally hundreds of articles waiting to be published because the editor insists on fact checking each and every one personally, and I'm given broad freedom to make the articles. Oh, it was about the 10-minute thing about how like we're just padding things or whatever. So either way.
Except most of our videos are this is about 10 minutes for getting so you can have mid-roll ads, right?
Yeah, which is not even something that's ever even like crossed my mind at all. Like, I actually went on a rant. If you go look at our 1 million subscriber video when we do the how it's made, that's what the video is called.
Yeah.
And I actually go on a rant about this at the end because this annoys me so much. So if anyone wants to go look at that rant, I won't repeat it here. But yeah.
And also, you could just look at our previous videos. It's like, oh, most of them are under 10 minutes.
Yeah, here we go. So Nick, there is a subscriber who asks, please do one on the myth of people sticking small rodents up their anuses.
Oh, yeah, the Richard
And so,
Gere thing. That's it.
I sent him and I said, interested in having your search history look super sketchy? And he was like, absolutely. And it's already pending, so it's ready to for me to look at.
I think that'll be a good
Yeah,
one.
no, totally.
I don't know
Totally
if a sponsor will buy it, but-
demonetized. Yeah, we're not making money on that one, but it should be interesting.
It's like, hey, Great Courses Plus, we got a video about people inserting things up their butts.
Who would do
you
that?
want to sponsor
Who
it?
would do that? What about
A lot of them we get it like they're pretty flexible
Some of
because
them,
I think
yeah.
they know that we're not gonna. It's still gonna be like we're not gonna be distasteful about it.
No, we'd totally be professional about the whole thing. And I'm,
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, as professional as you can be, sticking things up your butt.
I'm sure Carl wrote some jokes into it, but either way.
I'm sure he did.
So going, where
Sorry,
were we?
yeah.
Oh, yeah, we got
he
on
was
the
about
video.
he was about
bitter-
to get down to some rape.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure.
Definitely.
Because she's had the bitter
Yeah,
drink.
she becomes unconscious. The point being, shortly after, whether just because she drank,
Oh my God, what a surprise.
whether she drank a lot of champagne or because he actually put something in it. Either way. So she wakes up the next morning, according to her, and she said she's naked, and White is also naked beside her, and she also reports in a graphic detail in the trial about she had like some dried blood around her lady bits.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah. And so this she does not seem to. This is one of the things is during the trial. it's very like a traumatic as you might expect. But later in life, when she's writing her thing, she doesn't really paint it quite the same way. There's a minor question as to whether this was just like maybe it was more consensual than she made it out in the trial. But because we only have her original story to go by, everyone assumes. And either way, as you'll see, White, this was not out of character for him. So moving swiftly on, the two she became.
I like how it's like, oh yeah, taking women to your sex dungeon and raping them wasn't out of character for White.
Yeah.
How is that okay?
And not just not just women, young teen girls he had a thing for. So yeah.
It's like, oh, that White, he's known for it. Oh,
what a great guy
White.
that guy is.
Yeah.
But either way.
He's so charismatic and rich.
Well, back then, you could get away with a lot when you were rich. So White
Apparently.
She becomes his mistress, though, the point being afterwards, for about a year.
Okay. Also, what?
Yeah. You got to probably see it from her perspective, though, even then. Her career as an actress, it's not like she's making money to retire off of. She was making money to get by, even as successful as she was,
Yeah, but still, she's obviously incredibly beautiful.
Yeah. But it also...
Couldn't she take a pick of the weirdos?
She does, eventually, as you'll see. But there was a problem, of course, back then, is she's now considered by a lot of these wealthy guys, they want their virgin ladies, and she's now sort of that damaged goods type of thing mentality. And so this was a problem for her. And White was super prominent, and he could at his word just completely ruin her career and leave her destitute if he wanted. And he has incentive for her not to say anything because at the time it was illegal for someone over 18 in New York to have sex at all, whether consensual or not, with a under 18.
Wow. This is like super timely. I know this was like 100 some years ago, but given what's been going on in Hollywood and stuff, like Me Too, this is wow.
Totally. And so she has incentive not to say anything for various reasons. And he, of course, has incentive to make sure she doesn't. So he's continuing to take care of her and her family financially. And just, I don't know. I mean, so you can see maybe why she would stick around, I guess. What else was she supposed to do? Because if he could ruin her career and leave her on the streets, and sure, he'd get in trouble, but he's also super wealthy. So he might even just get off, so what's the point?
Yeah, no, I didn't want to say that this is like, what else why did she do this? It's like, he's the weirdo rapey guy.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's kind of situation.
And she does, she does actually, in her later autobiography and stuff, she seems to have actually liked him, like just on some level, at least. She didn't really say that in the trial, but later she would again paint him in a much nicer picture than she originally did. So I don't know.
Because this all came out in that trial when they were on other sides of the courtroom. Yeah. Is it possible that this didn't really happen? I mean, the mirror room, the weird velvet sex
No, he definitely
thing,
had he definitely had the mirror room and the red velvet swing thing.
But we don't know if he rapes her. It's like, because she was very incentivized to say that later because she was she was against him.
But she always did maintain that that really did happen. She did not ever call it rape, it happened. She always maintained that it happened exactly that way, which of course would be rape. But
even when she kind of changed her tune on him a little.
Yeah, she would still say it happened. She just sort of painted it as not, like in the trial, it was this very traumatic thing at the time. She didn't paint it as quite so traumatic later in her autobiography, but it's still rape either way you look at it, of like a 15-year-old girl for like a 40-some-year-old guy. So whatever you want to, either way. So she doesn't tell anyone about this. Eventually her relationship with him did come about. Like her mother learned that they were, sleeping together and stuff like that. And he was married at the time. But she also later would learn.
Just throw that in there as well.
Yeah, she would later learn, of course, that he actually had a book. Like literally, you always see this like the seedy trope of the seedy man with like the black book, with like all the numbers. He like had one of these with all these girls' names and stuff that he would, all these teen girls. So he had many mistresses at the time, and many more later. And so they eventually.
This sounds like it is from a novel.
Yeah. Quite the Girl with the Red Velvet Swing or whatever was a popular movie, I think in the 1950s, based on her life story. It was, highly fictionalized version of it. And she got paid actually like $10,000, which was about $100,000 today for kind of consulting on that movie, but most of the movie is fiction. But either way. So he continues to take care of the family. Mother's not too happy when she learns about the relationship, but what's she going to do? He's taking care of the son, taking care of the family. They, they needed White to be not basically ruin her career either, because then they'd just be out on the streets again. And so this goes on for about a year, and then they kind of break apart. And so she starts to, as a famous, wealthy, beautiful actress, she attracts many other suitors, including one Harry Thaw, who's, like I said, I think he was worth about $40 million, which whatever that is, a few $100 million today. So he's courting her and culminating. And this guy, as bad as White is, I would argue that this guy's way worse, as you'll see in momentarily.
This is the guy who he's also the violent one. We'll see.
He's kind of crazy.
This
guy takes it to a whole different level. So he takes the mother and Nesbit across for a tour across Europe because she has an emergency, supposedly appendectomy, but there's also some rumor it was like an abortion, and they just called it an appendectomy. Either ways, afterwards, to help her recover, he takes her across to Europe, to a nice tour around Europe into all these, wealthy places. And then he proposes to her there to ask her to marry her, but she, despite his wealth, turns him down. And her thought process, according to her, was that she knew he was obsessed with women being virgins. Like, this was like a literal obsession with him. And like, to the point that the tour through Europe featured visiting many sites of famous historical virgins. And like, he was taking her around to these places.
What?
Yeah. And so
that is so messed up.
Weird guy. And he also had a very really violent temper. So she knows this about him. But more.
Oh, just by the way, he was rich. I just looked up the inflation on that.
Yeah. Okay.
Like, he wasn't just a millionaire. He was into the billions.
Okay. Yeah. So he was insane. And so this, as you'll see later, the fact that he had a violent temper didn't really seem to be the problem here. It seemed to be more that she just assumed once he found out that he would just not want to marry her. So she just turns him down. He asks why, why are you turning me down? I'm like insanely wealthy and you're just an actress. So yeah, this, and she then explains to him, she reveals to him for the first person.
Sorry. I have to explain to you that this isn't how it works.
Yeah, back then, this was exactly how it would work.
Yeah, I know.
If you had even today, there's lots of people who, like, you, a insanely wealthy person would be like, well, okay. Like, if you're destitute, like if you potentially might find yourself on the streets tomorrow, if your beauty goes away and no one wants to see you act anymore, that sort of thing. So, and as a woman, of course, at this era, she says no. He asks why. She then tells him she's not a virgin anymore, and she tells him because of White and how that originally happened and how that affair started. And so Thaw, he already hated White because he had that temper and he was a little bit crazy, and was known for this. And so he was not getting into the various elite groups around New York. Like, every application to them kept getting rejected. And he was convinced it was because of White. White was bad-mouthing him in the groups, when in fact, White really didn't even think two thoughts about Thaw at all. And so what Thaw wasn't even, but
Thaw seems a bit crazy.
He is crazy. Legitimately, it was a little crazy. And the family had a bit of a history with craziness as well. He was quite mentally unstable. And so, but to Nesbit's great surprise, Thaw did not. He was, raged against White because White was sort of his arch nemesis in his own mind, even though White didn't even, think much about it. So he still said he wanted to marry Nesbit. But the problem was she turned him down once again. And you might be, well, why is she turning him down again? And it turns out, not long after she tells him about White, about what happened, Thaw locks her up in Katzenstein Castle. He locks her in her room in there, puts her mother on the other side of the castle. Then he proceeds for 2 weeks straight to severely beat her, including whipping her with an actual whip and then raping her repeatedly over the course of a couple weeks. And she is locked in that room and she cannot get out. And
dude,
so I'm just going to throw this not the way to convince a woman to marry you. I think this is like... Either way, she says no, as you might expect. I'm not going to marry you, you crazy psycho.
What a surprise.
Yeah. So eventually the tour ends.
He's like, what was it? I don't know. Maybe it was the whipping. Maybe it was the raping. Take your pick.
Yeah.
You psycho.
Yeah. So they go. He apologizes after, says, I don't know what came over me, whatever.
Dude, this is so 50 Shades of Grey. I've never read it. I assume he doesn't do much raping. But like the billionaire with the whips in the weird castle.
Yeah, combine White and Thaw.
And the young actress.
Yeah.
I don't know. Was she a young actress?
No,
I've never seen the movies.
I don't really remember. I think she was a journalist or something. Maybe. I don't know.
Oh, I think that's right.
author
Yeah.
or something. Either way. So Nesbit says no. She goes home. She tells people about the thing that happened with Thaw and like the white one, and they were like, "Yeah, he's crazy. Like you got to stay away from that guy." Like, so this was the real reason he wasn't.
And she's like, "Oh, I didn't realize.
Yeah,
I didn't know he was crazy."
Yeah. So an interesting little side note here. One of the people who courted her after this was John Barrymore, who is none other the grandfather of Drew Barrymore, who would not have existed had Nesbit accepted his proposal. He asked to marry her, but at the time he was not famous and he wanted to be an artist, not an actor. And so he wasn't famous, had no prospects really for resources and things, didn't have much money. And so she turns him down. She actually seemed to really like him. Like they seemed to be in love or whatever. But at the time, of course, she needed more than that as a lady of the, early 20th century. She needed more than just love. She needed some, prospects, future prospects. And so he didn't have it at the time. And so she turns him down.
It sounds like she was like, I need someone with some money who's also not a psycho.
Yeah, that would be nice. I like you because you don't lock me into a castle and beat me and rape me. But either way, she turns him down.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I know, right?
Dude,
this woman's life.
This
This woman's life is like a sad story, but then like when you read parts of her autobiography, like she talks about how she regrets nothing about her life because there was a lot of happy memories that if she had changed certain things would not have happened. So kept positive, upbeat.
Super intense.
Yeah. I mean, so, seems like a nice lady. But so this going on for about 4 years straight after this, Thaw is still around. He's still wanting to marry her, still occasionally proposing to her, and she keeps saying no. And eventually she is a little older. She is starting, what happened with like Thaw and White is now kind of known around town. And so, she's not getting some of the prospects she once was. She's getting more like the John Barrymores of the world and not these super wealthy elite. So Thaw is this insanely wealthy guy. And he is apparently, she did actually say he could be a very nice guy when he wasn't being psycho. And he treated her quite well during these non-crazy times. And so she eventually decides she's going to accept his proposal. Might as well. And so this Thaw's mother was quite against it.
So that whole thing you said about like, he put her in a dungeon. This was the same guy.
Yeah.
Thor and White, their names are too similar in a weird way.
Yeah.
So the same guy who was like, get in the dungeon for 2 weeks and then will you marry me? And she says no. She ends up actually marrying
4 years later, she ends up actually marrying him on April 4th, 1905. And the Thaw's mother was quite against it because she's, an actress and stuff and with the bad stigma with that. But Thaw was absolutely smitten with her. And so they eventually, Thaw's mother says, okay, you can do it, but she has to give up her career completely and no longer be an actress. And so she agrees because, she doesn't need the money anymore, nor looking for a husband. So she agrees. They get married April 4th, 1905. Fast forward to 1906 on the night of June the 25th. So they've been married about a little over a year. And Thaw and Nesbit decide to go to Mamselle Champagne on the rooftop of Madison Square Garden to show. It was a new show. And they get there. And who else is there but White sitting at his usual table? And he actually helped design that version of the Madison Square Garden, which later got demolished. But that one he helped design. And so Thaw before this had become quite paranoid that various people were out to kill him. He was convinced various groups were trying to kill him. And so he started carrying a gun with him. He was, paranoid and a little bit crazy. Yeah. No one was actually trying to kill him. But he's sitting there with his...
He was like that white guy who's been sabotaging me. And it's like, no, White doesn't even know who you are, mate.
Yeah. So White is sitting there in a thing. And so Thaw is quite agitated about this. He's just like, fixated on White. And he several times gets up to go approach White and then turns back and sits back down. He keeps doing this. And eventually... during the finale, during the I Could Love a Million Girls, sort of the ironical song for this to happen.
Oh yeah.
He completes the journey to White and kills him. And so we're going to read the account, or you're going to read the account from the New York Times as Thaw approached.
It reads, White must have seen Thaw approaching, but he made no move. Thaw placed the pistol against the head of the sitting man and fired 3 shots in quick succession. White's elbow slid from the table crashed over, sending a glass clinking along with the heavier sound. The body then tumbled from the chair. There was dead silence for a second, and then Thaw lifted his pistol over his head, the barrel hanging downward as if to show the audience that he was not going to harm anyone else. With a firm stride, Thaw started for the exit, holding the pistol as if it's anxious to have someone take it from his hand. Then came the realization on the part of the audience that the farce had closed with a tragedy. A woman jumped to her feet and screamed. Many persons followed her example, and there was a wild excitement. Lawrence, the manager of the show, jumped on a table and, above the roar, commanded the show to go on. "Go on playing," he shouted. "Bring on that chorus." Musicians made a feeble effort at gathering their wits and playing the chorus music, but the girls who romped on the stage were paralyzed with horror, and it was impossible to bring the performance to an orderly close. Then the manager shouted for quiet, and he informed the audience that a serious accident had happened and begged the people to move out of the place quietly. In the meantime, Thaw had reached the entrance to the elevators. On duty, there was fireman Paul Brudin. He took the pistol from Thaw's hand, but did not attempt to arrest him. Policeman Debes of the Tenderloin station appeared and seized his arm. "He deserved it," Thaw said to the policeman. "I can prove it. He ruined my life, and then he deserted the girl." Another witness said the word was wife instead of life. Just as the politician started into the elevator with Thaw, a woman described as dark-haired and short of stature reached up to him and kissed him on the cheek. This woman, some witnesses declare, was Mrs. Thaw.
Yeah, so this murder happens, and then Nesbit's now facing the possibility, one, the Thaw, maybe losing her husband or losing any support from him. And then she's also, she had already given up her career, and now she's going to be super notorious and maybe not being able to take back up that career because all the details of, her previous life there is about to get out. And so during this time, it appears that Thaw's mother says, "Okay, we're going to give you some money if you agree to basically make White look like the most awful person in the world and Thaw look like a noble husband just protecting your honor," type of thing. And so this is why it's not really clear. It's possible, everything she said was completely accurate and she didn't need to make anything up or, whatever at all. But, either way, what she did do was to give rather detailed accounts. At the time, it would have been more appropriate or more typical for the woman to sort of just allude to things instead of actually give the detailed accounts of like her relationship with White. But she gave like all the details of just, their various liaisons and stuff to basically, get sympathy for Thaw and be like, well, yeah, any husband at that time of course he's going to kill White. Like he did that to his would become his wife. So, This was kind of the idea. If the trial went against Thaw, she would get nothing. If it went in his favor and she testified as the Thaw's lawyers were kind of wanting her to, then she would get a decent amount of money, not like enough to set her up for life, but at least some. And she was still married to Thaw at the time, so maybe that would work out. That wouldn't later, as we'll see. They ended up getting divorced, but. So basically, that's the strategy they went with. There was the alternate strategy the lawyers thought up. They initially wanted to do was just to do the temporary insanity defense and just go with that one. And then that would be a no doubter. The jury would rule, okay, sure. But the Thaw's mother was very against that one because the family already had a reputation for insanity, and her son also had a reputation for being a little crazy, and she didn't want. If they went with that one, then it would just be something that everyone thought of him always. And so she wanted it rather to go with a noble husband type angle and see if that would work out. Like, even though it was still murder, if the jury would just be like, yeah, it's murder, but like it's justified.
It's cool.
Yeah. So she was hoping for that one. So the first trial, there was two.
Wow. You look at it today and it's like, nah, this dude was definitely nuts.
Yeah, he was. And he was facing the electric chair here. So this was risky, the strategy, because the temporary insanity probably, that does seem to be kind of what happened. But the other defense were just relying on the jury to be like, nah, it's all right.
You say temporary insanity.
Yeah.
I think the problem is if he runs this insanity, I don't know how the law works in the States or like present day law would be like, it's risky to run a defense of insanity because then it's like you need to go to an institution.
Yeah.
But it's not a defined period. There's no real.
Yeah. Well, and
you can be there forever.
This was a problem later, but he was super wealthy, had great lawyers. So he eventually did get out, as we'll get into. But so the first trial though, they're going,
oh, money.
They're going, yeah, especially back then. Even today, but back then even more so. So so they went with a noble husband way. And so that's kind of their strategy. It was shown later that the lawyers paid tons of people to come up and basically, say whatever they wanted them to say about White.
Sure.
So that was the thing. And the mother spent a whopping $500,000 wasted about $14 million today on doctors to proclaim that Harry Thaw was actually perfectly sane during the two trials at first, and then later, of course, to show that he was insane, but then later, of course, to go back on it and say, no, now he's actually sane again, and this whole thing. So that almost $14 million she spends through the whole debacle.
Yeah, but wait. Hang on. Was the Thor dude wealthy from his family, or was he independent? Like, did he
family wealth. Yeah, I believe railroads or something. I mean, something
like $14 million to someone who's a billionaire.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not pocket change, but it's not. You're not. Like,
yeah, and she was trying to get her son out of the asylum, so.
Right. So it's like where should we spend money? Probably on you not getting.
Well, but it is just funny that in the first trial, it's like to show that he's actually quite sane.
Oh, of course, this was later.
And then later switching tunes and be like, no, he's actually insane. And then later switching back to, no, he's totally sane. Like he should just.
I think I need to repeat my comment of, oh, money.
Yeah. So White wasn't around to defend himself, obviously, and yeah. There's some argument as to, if he was quite as villainous as he was, but the part that definitely seems to be true is that he really liked the teenage girls. So, yeah.
Mm.
So no one was really willing to come to his defense. And even his own wife, naturally, was like, no, I'm not going to defend him. So the only prominent person, I should say, was journalist Richard Harding Davis, who said simply of White,
since his death, White has been described as a satyr. Oh, I looked up the pronunciation of that and I forgot it.
Sure.
Never mind. Satyr, we'll go with that. To answer this by saying he was a great architect is not to answer at all. What is more important is that he was a most kind-hearted, most considerate, gentle, and manly man who could no more have done the things attributed to him than he could have roasted a baby on a spit. Big in mind and in body, he was incapable of little meanness. He admired beautiful women, as he admired every other beautiful thing God has given us, and his delight over one was as keen, as boyish, as grateful over any others.
Mm-hmm.
That's
so
passionate defense.
Yeah. That was basically the one prominent defense, which isn't much of a defense.
Yeah.
But
well, you can see, we've talked about this before on this show, like about the research and looking back into things.
Yeah.
And it's like, so a lot of this comes from this trial later, where a ton of money and a ton of people who are very incentivized to make a dude look bad say all of these things about him.
Yeah. And presumably his wife White's wife could have come to his defense and used some of I assume, the money that she, still had around from, but she obviously with his many mistresses wasn't too inclined to come to his defense on this one. So,
but also this guy is like, even though I'm sure she's wealthy, this guy's family are phenomenally wealthy. Assuming they live in the same city, these social circles are important.
White was not at the same level of wealth as the Thaw family. So even if she had all the money, it still wouldn't, it would have been a lot more money against her lot less money. And
I think she's probably got things to consider about, like, he's dead. Yeah. What do I gain?
Yeah.
Tangibly from coming forward and defending my husband. My husband's honor, he's dead. My kind of tangential honor. But if I come forward, this rich family, it's what, 19 something?
Yeah.
This family's going to destroy me.
And her former rich husband, who she might not even like that much because I don't even think they lived together or whatever. It was one of those, like,
fine.
He has lots of mistresses.
Even if they were super in love, she's big time disincentivized not to come to his defense.
Yeah. Either way, we're going to come back now to women and cakes. So during the trial,
whoa.
Yeah, Nesbit.
Decompression sickness.
Yeah, Nesbit reveals the illicit details.
Was this episode an aside? Was this whole episode an aside?
Kind of. I thought the trial was super interesting, so I thought it would be interesting.
I suppose I think we're titling it the trial of the century leading to the cake.
Without this trial, the whole cake thing wouldn't have been nearly so popular. So going back to that is
in my mind, I just had this episode like the cake episode, and then I'm like, wait, this isn't about cakes at all.
Well, that's So she reveals the details of the Pie Girl dinner because, of course, this makes White look like a really awful person once again. And this Pie Girl dinner really did happen, and there was lots of witnesses and stuff to happen just how she said. So, that one we can confirm was a real thing. So while this pie girl dinner, it wasn't actually thought to be the first time that anyone got the bright idea for like a woman to jump out of some sort of food item, large food item.
A bright idea.
Yeah, it definitely was the one that would
Genius.
Yeah, that would make it super popular. And it would gain in popularity over the coming decades, as you might imagine. So you read about these super wealthy people having, half-naked women jump out of cakes or pies or whatever. And this became quite mainstream by the 1950s. It was not just bachelor parties, which is kind of the way it's still around today sometimes. So it was actually like office parties was just common because, of course, at the time, most offices just had men or, whatever. And they certainly were inviting mostly... why you don't know the expression wingding?
We share when we're recording these podcasts, we have notes in front of us in like a Google Drive document. Yeah. And in the notes, it says, one thing I'd point out is you wrote, it was downright mainstream to have women jumping out of cakes, not just mainstream. But then also I see here, office wingdings. And I assume that means parties. But what's a wingding?
A lively event or party is the official.
That's not in common usage.
Or how about Merriam-Webster's is a wild, lively, or lavish party. So that is like a perfect word for this.
True.
I did not actually know the definition was that fitting. So there you go.
To me, wingdings are the things you have in Microsoft Word. Instead of like a font, you have wingdings.
Widgets and things. So so this became like a popular thing at the time in the 1950s. By the 1950s, it was super popular. It was just like a thing that happened a lot, and they actually did, contrary to popular beliefs, they did use real cakes even in the 1950s. It wasn't like fake ones, and so we even have there was an AP News article from 1975 interviewing a San Francisco baker who exclusively made his living by charging $2,000 a pop, which is about $10,000 today, to construct these huge cakes, which then he would place like a cardboard cylinder inside, and then it would be large enough for a woman to crouch down in and then come out. And so, and if you're curious, the women who did this, the cake jumpers, according to this article, would make about $50 per thing. So that was about $230 today. So not like great money, but you consider it might be like, an hour of work or something.
Yeah, not bad.
Horrible.
I mean, you got to sit in a cake for some time, I guess.
That whirlwind.
It's going to be built around you. Also, it'd kind of be pretty grim if it was a guy who's just new and making the cakes. And he was like, oh, I didn't put it in an air hole. They just like, surprise.
Yeah, I wonder how because they had to have had like a little bit of ventilation. Especially if you're putting birds in there, like in the pie girl.
That's
which that couldn't have been pleasant, crouching in the pie with the birds, like all these birds in there,
and 27 other members of the orchestra.
Yeah, that one. Yeah. So, anyways, so you see it in like it was some like a hot 1959 Marilyn Monroe. You have there is a lot of media references, and I think was it the Under Siege or something was like in 1990s or something. Have you seen that one? I think it was that one that had the famous scene where the girl, I think everyone's dead at the party and she jumps out and freaks out, obviously. But either way, so this became super popular. And as you might imagine, it became much less popular in the 1970s to hold these things at like office parties as
women enter the workplace.
This is not something accepted to be done anymore at office parties. So it sort of bachelor parties became the thing where it was a thing somewhat, but of course they switched to fake cakes because it's cheaper and that sort of thing. So just like cardboard cutout cakes and things to have that happen. Yeah. And that's pretty much, I think, about the only place this ever happens anymore, right? Like bachelor parties, probably.
I thought it happened in movies from the 50s. That was and The Simpsons. I might be wrong about The Simpsons, but this I just thought it was kind of like a fake thing or like historical thing. I didn't know it still happened.
No, it's still probably not super. I feel like nowadays it's like the stereotype is to just go to a strip club or something for bachelor parties or stag parties or something rather than.
No, I didn't have a bachelor party. I'm very boring.
Oh, well, I didn't. I don't think. Oh, I went to a Mariners game. That was mine with my brothers. So that wasn't quite boring. Nice. As well. It was a good game though. It went to like 14 innings, walk-off grand slam by Brett Boone. Yeah. People can,
there you go.
I think Edgar Martinez, 9th inning, I think tied it up with like a 2-run home run. I can't really remember. There's something like that.
No idea what you're talking about, but fantastic.
This way people can actually track down what the actual game was if people cared.
But I don't think they do.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. Point being, not super exciting. I think it was against the Boston Red Sox. I'm pretty sure it was a Boston Red Sox game. Yes. I remember.
I have got I have never been into sport. It's not just baseball. Like, I don't give a crap about football, soccer, as you guys call it, anything. And everyone does. So I've just got really good at faking it. Just being like, oh yeah, that's real good. Yeah, cool. That sounds, good. Sports.
Yeah. So at this point, I guess.
So I didn't have a woman jumping out of a cake at a bachelor party. You didn't have it at the Mariners game?
No, turns out. Would have been frowned upon, I think. Family-friendly environment and all. But people might be wondering at this point what happened to the Thaw trial. The whole aside that half this episode was about. So how did this actually turn out? Turned out deadlocked jury at first, which was a little bit of surprise. They had expected that that the jury would just be like, well, yeah, of course he killed him. He did the right thing as the husband should do or whatever, but that's not how it turned out. And he was risking the electric chair here if he was found guilty. So he ended up getting committed to, I should say then there was a second trial to sort of resolve this. And this time the lawyers did go, all right, this was closer than we thought it should be. So let's go ahead and just go with that insanity thing. And just so then we'll work on getting him out later. At least he won't go to the electric chair if the second trial doesn't go. Oh, and it should be noted, this trial was the first one in U.S. history where the jury had to be sequestered because it was such a media hype that they had to actually sequester the jury to, because there were so many different things being printed, whether true or not, at the time. So this was the first U.S. trial where that was deemed something that was needed. And so they did this, and then so they did the insanity thing. He, of course, that one was a lock. He is crazy. So he ends up finding himself in an asylum, supposedly for life. But then at a certain point, he literally just walks out of the asylum because in the asylum he was given lots of perks that no one else got. He basically could live lavishly in there.
Being a billionaire.
Yeah, and so he eventually just walked out, got in the car with a driver that had been prearranged, and drives to Canada. So he goes to Canada in 1913, but Canada is like, no, we're going to deport him. They eventually decide to send him back to the U.S. So he's then once again put in the asylum. But in 1915, they finally got him declared completely sane. And so he gets out. But then what does he do? But within a year, he kidnaps a 19-year-old guy named Frederick Gump, takes him, locks him up, whips him, beats him, and sexually assaults him, similar to the whole Nesbit thing back in the castle. And so he very quickly finds himself back in the asylum. The family did offer a boatload of money to the Gump family to drop charges and just say it never happened. But they did actually settle some amount, but they didn't. He still got locked up and everything.
Whenever this happens, whenever something like that happens, it's like, and how many times did they say yes?
Yeah, and
it's like within a year he did this. Yeah. But no, within a year he did this, and the guy didn't want to get paid.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So,
especially when it's the billionaire who would have to go back into a mental asylum, that check's going to get pretty big real fast.
Yeah. In any event, by 1924, he was released from the asylum once again. So he was in there, 8 years or so? And he ultimately led, nothing too exciting happening in life, dies in 1947. He did actually leave Nesbit. They had gotten divorced. I think it was around that 1915-ish range when he was declared sane. So she did have a child supposedly by him in 1910, but he had conjugal visits and stuff like that. And she claims the boy was by him, but the Nesbit basically, he had read newspaper accounts because she was still quite famous, and newspaper, as media will follow them around. And she was seen about town with, in the company of various men. Whether she was actually, doing anything or just, having dinner or whatever, isn't really clear. But either way, he got quite jealous. And so, cuts her off from financially and stuff. So she has to kind of make her own way. But she claims in 1910, they did have a child together. It's her only son. He denied it and never claimed the boy as his. And she eventually gave up. Even though supposedly, she said, just look at him. He looks exactly like his father, type of thing. That was kind of her main argument, but either way.
This was before ancestry DNA.
Yeah. Either way, she eventually gave up, trying to get, any inheritance or whatever for her son. Her son became a quite successful pilot, a stunt pilot in various races and also in World War II, quite successful career.
That's cool.
And he would go on to support Nesbit in her old age and stuff. But either way, Thaw denied it. He said, no, that never happened. So going back to Nesbit, what happened to her? So they get divorced. She gets married again, gets divorced because partially the relationship was a little bit struggled because of how famous Nesbit was in the media. He was kind of considered Mrs. or Mr. Nesbit, and that of course for the early 20th century man was a little bit of a blow to the ego and stuff. So anyways, their relationship didn't go well. They got divorced. And she did reconcile with Thaw a little bit. They became at least somewhat friendly, though they did not get back together eventually. And Thaw did leave her $10,000 in his will when he died, which is about $112,000 today. But otherwise, she just did various jobs. She did some acting, some silent films, and then she worked at a burlesque place, but not as a stripper or anything. She just worked there. And eventually, she found herself in California, where she taught sculpting and art, which was kind of how she finished her career, just teaching that, and also being kind of taken care of by her son.
There you go.
Yeah,
that's it.
That's it.
That was an eventful life.
Yeah.
Dude, this is quite a dark episode. I know we've done some dark episodes, but this one's kind of like, unpleasant.
It is. And with all this woman put up with, not just like all the stuff in her early life, but also the media attention for her, much of her life and stuff like that. If you read like quotes and things from her, she was like a positive person, just like kept a good upbeat attitude. And that's amazing because you think about like all that she went through to not just she did at one point try to kill herself. So that's something, but she didn't in the end. I think it was when she got fired from the one place and she was back to, no way to support herself. I can't remember, the Moulin Rouge Club or something like that. She got fired from something like that. And then, but overall, quite a remarkable woman, I think, to just keep that positive attitude through everything that she went through is quite amazing.
Pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Should we do some follow-up?
We should.
I have one. Someone wrote, I think it was an email maybe, that it wasn't Sicilian pirates. Do you remember we were talking about Julius Caesar getting kidnapped by pirates?
Uh-huh. That was a long time ago.
That was a long time ago. I don't think this email was from that long ago. Or
okay.
I should have wrote in the notes where this came from so I could give the person due credit. I apologize if you're listening. But they were like, it was actually Silesian pirates.
Oh. Well, that only changes the joke at the end, right? There was a joke about the Sicilian pirate never go up against a Sicilian when death's on the line or something like that. Worth it for the joke.
It was.
Yeah.
But there you go. I just thought I'd offer that. Then a more important one: can you drink aboard Navy vessels like in the movies?
Oh yeah, we had a couple of people ring in on this.
We did. I saw on the comments just the other day. And people seem to come up with exactly the same conclusion that I did. I came up with a couple of recommendations on where people can go to read this. There's a great one on themilitarytimes.com. And basically the UK, the Royal Navy, they've just made like a vessel, the first vessel, and it's got a pub on it. And so basically if you're an officer or a senior enlisted man, so basically if you're like higher up in the ranks, you can go and hang out on this pub, on this new vessel.
Really?
And there's even a local brewery from where the ship was setting sail from, whatever, and they made them their own special beer to have on board the ship. And I'm like, that's really cool.
Yeah.
You know what's disappointing, though? If you're in the US Navy, that's what you call it?
Mm-hmm.
Total abstinence. Almost. You can't drink at all. There's no, like in my mind, it's like at some point they have some celebration, like Tom Cruise comes home from like shooting down some bad guys or whatever. And there's a guy with like a cooler filled with bad American beer. And he's like throwing it out to the other guys and they're like cracking these beers open. And there's like a slow motion shot of Tom Cruise drinking beer from a can or whatever. Or like in Vietnam movies, or maybe there was beer in Vietnam, but they always seem to be drinking beer or whatever.
Yeah.
But I guess that's a bit different. Anyway, so you can have 2 beers. Each sailor is entitled to 2 beers, but that's if the ship has been at sea for 45 consecutive days, and that's just on a one-time basis. So if you're at sea for 45 days, they will give you 2 beers after 45 days.
I wonder how much, though, like, even though that's the rules, is there like contraband? Is anyone really keeping track of who drank their 2 beers and who didn't?
I don't have it specifically for naval vessels, but I do have some follow-up about the war in Iraq, which I'll get to in a second. You want to contrast? So the British, they've just built their first ship with a pub. The US, they don't have any pubs. Let's move on to the French. They have this giant aircraft carrier, or I'm pretty sure it's an aircraft carrier called the Charles de Gaulle. On this ship, they have 4 bars, 4 individual bars where people can drink. Naturally. And a lot of the articles talking about this just brought up like this is a big cultural difference between like France and the US. It's like casual drinking of alcohol is just like a part of the French culture and you can't take that away from them.
Yeah.
And they're only allowed 1 drink every day. So I guess at the end of their shift, they can go to the bar on one of the bars.
Do they also have like 4-hour shifts?
I don't know. Is it normal to have 4-hour shifts?
No, I just the French have the reputation of what, like the 30-hour work week or 25-hour work week. Is this also in the Navy reflected, or do they have actual more? You know?
Do you want to do follow up on follow up? However, there's one exception. So, if you're a US sailor, and because the US and France are allies and they occasionally do operations together, currently there are 10 US Navy personnel serving on board the Charles de Gaulle, and they are allowed to drink with a Frenchman. Oh, so those are the 10 sailors in the US Navy who can have a beer after work.
Yeah. Hey, this is Simon jumping in during the actual edit of this podcast. This bit, just listening back to it, I didn't really feel that this was what we wanted to put on this podcast. It's just a little too grim. There's going to be references to it throughout, but just listening back, it really wasn't. I just didn't really felt it belonged here. If you do want to learn more about this, we'll put a link to a news article in the description of this episode, so you can click on that. But I just thought we'd keep it a little more, not exactly cheery. This is not a cheery episode, but this stuff just got too dark for this show. I didn't want it in here. Let's get back to the show, and if there's weird bits missing, that's why. Link in the description.
Let's move on to something a little more cheery. Yeah. So we were asking, like, you know, pirates wearing their eye patches, did they do it to go below decks?
Oh, yeah? You looked this up?
So if you're like above deck and you want one eye to be able to see in the light and then go below deck and one eye to be able to see in the dark, the short answer is basically we don't know if they wore them to go above or below decks. It does work. It is definitely something that could have happened. Mythbusters tested it out, but there's no first-hand accounts of this actually being why they wore eye patches. It's just speculation. The subreddit Ask Historians, which I didn't know about, which is excellent. There was a whole thread about this, and there was this wonderful thing, kind of like people, they kind of explained how this myth kind of came to be, and it was kind of basically treasure islands, and then people thinking of that being how pirates, how they are. And then also Mythbusters. And then basically Mythbusters showing this thing and people assumed, yes, because it worked, it happened. And the Ask Historians are quite salty. They're like, Mythbusters is entertaining, but it's not history, guys.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not really always very good at actually definitively busting myths either way. But they definitely say they've busted myths sometimes, but then you're like, well, but wait a minute, your methodology there makes it so you can't really say anything definitive at all. But at the same time, they're making an entertainment show with a
you're saying
schedule.
It's not peer reviewed.
A tight schedule and all that. So I realize how hard that job must be. And
I'd also say, tight schedule. Also, Mythbusters is like an hour long?
Yeah.
It is the most drawn out show of like getting to the point. There's even a YouTube channel called Mythbusters for the Impatient, which takes Mythbusters episodes and cuts out all of the unnecessary stuff, and they're like 10 minutes long.
Of course, we are now like an hour and 40 minutes into this episode, so people are like, wait a minute, this was supposed to be out of women jumping out of cakes.
Yeah, that's true. We do tangents, but I don't know. I feel it's a little different. Yeah. Like, we've got some fluff.
I find they're the interesting tangents. What did we go over today? We went history, like food dishes. We went to the said actress to the bishop, and that's what she said, origins.
That's what she said.
Women jumping out of cakes, the dwarf jumping out of a pie. We got a super interesting and, debauched trial and all this. So,
You know what we don't have today? Reviews, because this episode is unbelievably long.
Yeah, it's probably for the best.
Let's catch up with those next time.
Yeah. Sounds good.
This one was good. I enjoyed it.
Probably for the best.
Enjoy it?
Probably for the best that we didn't actually live stream this one.
Yeah, I wonder when I'll listen to it back and it's like I say something, like accidentally inappropriate.
Yeah. No, exactly, because you get that like a quote taken out of context, Yeah. And sometimes
you could probably stitch this together.
Also, the tendency to sometimes when something's like so absurdly awful to just laugh and that can be taken out of context. It's like,
while we were recording this, I was thinking that very thing. It's like, I'm laughing at this.
yeah,
but it's not because it's
so
funny.
Absurdly awful that what else can you
Yes.
do but laugh? And I think actually there's been a couple episodes where people have critiqued because I do that a lot. And it's like, well, that's just, what else can you do? That's, it's not like I don't think it's funny. It's just, And actually, another tangent. It turns out, I can't remember the exact thing. Let me just Google it real quick here. The people actually almost never laugh when they think something is funny. Like, it's actually, most laughter has nothing to do with humor at all.
I read this as well. Did we make a video about this?
Why we laugh? I believe we did. I don't know if we made the video, but I've definitely covered it, and it's quite interesting. Yeah, there's a study, for instance. There's a study covering 2,000 cases of natural occurring laughter. And it's and most of them were just like ha-has and just like random laughs. And I didn't put the percentage on this part. I'd have to do some more digging. But either way, it was the vast majority of the cases were just the short ha-has and had nothing to do with humor. They were more just like almost like a
uncomfortable.
Yeah, a social glue type thing to sort of like almost like acknowledge you were listening to someone, or this sort of things, or like you say, like these uncomfortable things where it's just like something's absurd or horrific or whatever. And so laughter actually is used in a lot of different contexts, not just humor. But yeah, I'm sure we'll get some comments about some of the laughs, and probably best.
That's your excuse anyway.
Yeah.
Because obviously you do find this hilarious.
Yeah, hilarious. Yeah.
Also, another thing I do want to point out is people sometimes don't always get my sarcasm.
Yeah.
When it's like, when we're talking about like, oh yeah, so he took her to his sex dungeon and raped her for like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then she marries him. And I say, that seems like the logical choice. I don't mean that.
Yeah.
I'm saying that as it is not the logical choice. It's a terrible, weird decision.
Yeah. Yeah, we had one. I can't remember what it was. Drew commented the other day. Our ad guy, who's amazing. He was something. We said something, and it was totally. It came across as we were just totally being serious, and we were actually quite the opposite of that.
Oh, the one about etymologies.
Yeah, about what being popular,
Yeah.
and it did sound like we were being totally serious, but no, those never do well. Contrary to what we said.
They are very entertaining.
Yeah.
but they never do well.
No, never.
At least for me.
Yeah.
I don't know. I find it more entertaining.
Yeah, I do. I think they're kind of interesting to see the evolution of things. But
All right. We've prattled on enough.
this was
Should we,
darkest episode yet. Although
Yeah.
no, we did have I don't know. I would say this is a little darker than like the killings ones where we had the mass murders. Or how about the horrific love story one?
I always feel the ones where it's like, where there's that weird power dynamic of people getting screwed over by people who can just utterly control them.
Yeah.
Is always just a little bit more uncomfortable.
Well, and you feel so bad for this Nesbit, like what's she supposed to do in that time, and
right, like we're
what the
saying,
position
like,
she was in.
Why
was
did
just
she
like,
get?
Yeah, you just feel bad for
Why
her.
did
And
she
then,
marry the crazy dude? And it's like, well, she didn't do it because she was
yeah,
like, she's not at fault here.
no, and she's like remarkable just for not killing herself basically at a certain point with all the stuff she went through. Like a quite amazing woman, I think. But either way, amazing person, I should say. Just to stand up to that all mentally and everything. But darker, yeah, I agree. I think this one was darker. I'd take the murder ones. It's less dark.
Yeah, I'd rank it as so as well.
Yeah, well, especially when you throw in that's the story with the soldiers at the end, caps it off.
Yeah, let us never speak of that again.
Yes, agreed.
I'm always torn about this. Sorry, I know I just said I wanted to wrap up, but I'm always torn about discussing this sort of stuff because it's like, you don't want to talk about it, but it should definitely be brought up because it's kind of like, this is something super horrific.
Yeah.
It's like people should know about this.
Yeah.
All right. On that jolly note, It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Well,
I'll talk to you very soon for another episode.
Yeah. Sounds good.
All right. What's most notable about it is it's a very small man and it's a very large boo.